Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 6 of the Corcoran Cap, the podcast where we're talking Warriors, Syracuse, A's, Niners. Starting off with the Golden State Warriors today. I am your host, Sam Corcoran. To my right, Joel Pettit. Man, Joel, I mean, the Mavs game on, I think it was Sunday, just absolutely brutal. You had the good Blazers game, but brutal game against the Mavs, and now a brutal schedule coming up.
Yeah, Mavs game, it's one of the more brutal losses in recent history. I mean, regular season, because obviously playoffs had more implication, but I mean, that was just an epic collapse.
Yeah, and if you guys missed it, the Warriors, they had a 21-point lead going into the fourth, and they blew it. And the Mavs went on a 33-8 run in the fourth quarter. Kuminga, Wiggins, and Curry especially really fell off in that fourth quarter. I mean, it was just flat out awful. And honestly, I mean, I didn't watch that game, but I just saw the score. I was like, oh, cool. Warriors are up by 19, end of third, I think it was. We're gonna win, and then I just get the notification. Final Mavs 107, Warriors 94. The Warriors barely scored in the fourth quarter.
We scored 13 points in the fourth quarter. The Mavs scored 33. Only 1%. There was I think a 7 to 8 minute drought of us not making a shot in the fourth quarter, which was painful. Steph was the only person who made more than one basket in the fourth quarter, and he went 2 for 8.
And
so it's not
even he didn't do that well.
No, but and granted, some of those were forced shots, really quick shots late to try and cut the lead down. But still, he was not at his best. Wiggins had an overall just really. He started off really good, but then he cooled off in the second half a lot. In the first half, he had 13. In the second half, he had 5. Nobody other than Steph scored double digits in the second half. Yeah, it was just a complete collapse. And it wasn't turnovers. It wasn't things that you'd normally think kill us. Our shooting for the game wasn't great overall. We were 43%. The threes were bad. One thing that stood out to me, though, we were 12 of 20 on free throws. That's 60%. That's awful.
That's
Steph
terrible.
Went 2 for 4. Steph went 2 for 4. Looney,
which is unheard of.
Yeah, and Wiggins, the $30 million player. Look, I love Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins went 2 for 5 on free throws. His free throws this year dropped down 65% this year. He's 64.5. That's what he's at on free throws this year. That's just not good enough.
You've got to do better than that. No, it's not gonna cut it. It is absolutely not gonna cut it. And you have to.
And in big playoff games on the road, when you get fouled, up 2, down 2, 2 possession, 1 possession game, you have to be able as a wing to step up there. I'm not saying Wiggins doesn't contribute, but given his other, strengths and flaws, you need to be a good free throw shooter. We need to have confidence in you to be able to make 2 in a playoff game on the road in a tight spot.
Exactly. And also seems like, this isn't that big, but not only did we lose, we lost a player in that game. Nemanja Bjelica's out tonight against Minnesota. She got some sort of quad injury on a rebound. So he could miss some time as well. And that definitely hurts our power forward depth. I think having a stretch 4 has always been critical for the Warriors' success. Bjelica hasn't. He's been all right this year. Nothing special.
His playing time had been going down in general recently. I think they're
giving more minutes to Kuminga.
Kuminga's been getting more minutes. That's the big one. And I think we don't know when Draymond's coming back. There's rumors that Wiseman has been ramping up his work, and that we could be. I mean, I think from what we've been hearing, we'll be seeing him probably a little sooner than we'll see Draymond, which just helps getting size back. I mean, we have Juan Toscano-Anderson, whose playing time has also been going down. If Bjelica is going to be out for an extended period of time, I would expect to see his minutes go up a little bit. And definitely, Kuminga's minutes have been going up anyway, so I think expect more, pretty much the same from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Wiseman, I have a quick question for you, Joel. Who's starting, Looney or Wiseman?
Oh, Looney. Looney starting. Wiseman, I think you work him in. I mean, I think with the limited experience that he's had and actually playing in the NBA, I think the goal for him in a playoff scenario is to put him in for 15 minutes and just hope that he can play hard.
I feel like he's more of
run
an
the floor.
offensive guy than Looney is. But I think Looney's
absolutely.
Looney's defense is what we need, I feel like, for this team. And that's why I feel like it's a better fit, because this is an offensive minded team. And I think he's going to be our sixth man, I would say.
I would say that ideally you would want a 2-man game between him and Poole to become somewhat a thing down the stretch of this year, depending on how much we get to see him play. Pick and rolls between the two of them, especially when it's no Steph, and even if it's Draymond, you can have him be you could have maybe Draymond set it up, get everybody into their sets in the half court. Clay can play off the ball. Steph can play off the ball. But I think a Poole-Wiseman 2-man game works because in the future, assuming we keep both of them more so in the long term, that's what you're going to want. I mean, the NBA now is so much just stretch pick and roll with a guy who can shoot off the bounce and someone who can be a threatening force going to the rim. That's ideally what Poole and Wiseman are going to be. So I think that seeing those two come off the bench is what we're going to be looking at, ideally.
Exactly. Enough of the Mavs game. One more thing about the Mavs game. Back-to-back collapses at home in the fourth quarter. Cannot happen.
This one was
this one was way worse, but I think the Denver one also. I mean, you had a buzzer beater at the end. Never a good sign. They were
both bad. I mean, look, I think the Denver one came down to one shot. We were also kind of limping in the All-Star break at that point. You could see guys were clearly tired. This one, we had multiple games off. Like I had pointed out, I think, at the last time. Yeah, we had 3 days since the Portland game, and it was at home. There was no reason for us to get so down on ourselves late in that game, and it looked just the energy was bad. Kerr said it. It was like we lost our edge in the fourth quarter, and there's no excuse for it other than that we just kind of caved in, and that's unacceptable. The Denver one, you can blame it more on fatigue. It was less of a deficit and less just appalling fashion that we lost the game. And, we got completely worked by a big guy. This one was a combination of Dinwiddie and Luka and just conceding way too many wide open shots, look, the Denver game, plenty of other flaws, but this one was significantly worse. But you're right. It's back-to-back collapses at home, which you never want to see.
Never can happen, really. Now let's move on to the Portland game. And I want to start this off. This is honestly one of the most remarkable stat sheets I've ever seen in all of sports, in my opinion. 132 points and your lead scorer put up 18. That just goes to show the depth of the team. How many? Okay, double-digit scores. Wiggins, Gary Payton Jr., Looney, Curry, Clay, Kuminga, Poole, Otto Porter. That's 8 guys scoring in double figures. That's absolutely ridiculous. And that's the play. That is the Warriors play you need to see. I don't care if Steph goes off for 50 and everyone else is like, okay, game. You had like maybe one other double-digit score. This is a performance I love to see, and this is a performance that every NBA team dreams, every basketball team dreams of. If you can get, I mean, I think honestly, like I would say a good game is guys, and when you have guys, I would say a good game for an NBA team is when you have at least 3 or 4 guys in double figures. That you're usually going to win those games unless the other team is just significantly better than you, and or those double figures are like 10, 11, 10, 10 or something like that. When you have 8 guys in double figures, there is no shot the other team is going to beat you.
No, I mean Portland got off to a really hot start. I mean, they're a young team, and part of what you don't want to do is do what we did early on, which is get them into a good momentum. But their lack of talent caught up to them, and we just turned the faucet off later. And like you said, everybody contributed. Everybody contributed. All the starters scored in double figures. That's great. Everybody on the team made a shot. I was commenting when talking to my dad about this. I was just thinking this to myself. This was the definition of a feel-good win. Everybody contributed.
100%.
And, it was what we needed. And you'd think coming off of this that we would have, come to play against Dallas. But let's leave that in the past. Let's focus on this game.
Exactly. And the 4 guys who didn't get in double figures are kind of the guys who aren't getting the ball that much. Damian Lee, Juan Toscano Anderson, Moses Moody, and Nemanja Bjelica. So the guys who are getting the ball.
Yeah, I was about to say, Moody and Bjelica played a combined basically 20 minutes. So that's a little tough. And Quan Toscano-Anderson is not a shoot first player. And and then so Damian Lee is the only one of, you heard 8. He'd be maybe one of the 8 you guess, but it's still great. I mean, he had 7 points. If he took 1 3 and he missed it, if that shot went in, he'd have double-digit points. We'd be at 9.
Exactly. And one thing I also want to take notice of, the Warriors have been getting more assists lately. I've been seeing that a lot in the stat sheets. 36 against Portland is very high compared to Portland's 16. And even against Dallas, I know we collapsed, but 27 compared to Dallas' 16. Been much like moving the ball around. Like people, this is what I love about this team. They understand how much depth they have. I think the Portland game just really sums that all up. They have so much depth. No one's selfish on this team. They're going to do what's best for the team, not them. They want to move the ball around. They want to get the best scoring opportunities they can. And I love that. And that Portland game was amazing to watch and amazing to just look at the stats. I mean, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Also, 56 paints in the point compared to Portland's 34. That's kind of ridiculous. Yep. That just, we played great defense in that game. Overall, I think that could have been one of our best games of the season.
One thing I also loved about it, this is one of the craziest quarters you'll see, and especially in terms of us, because we shoot a lot of threes. I think we're top 2 or 3 in the league in terms of 3-point attempts. The second quarter, we shot 18 free throws in a quarter. And part of that was Kuminga was relentless going to the rim. And he got knocked down several times. He got hit pretty hard in an illegal screen. He was getting roughed up. And, some guys may have shied away from that. He stepped up. He took 8 free throws in that quarter. Steph took 6. Them two combined went 13 for 14 on free throws in a quarter. They
just could not stop the bigs. They just cannot
Then Portland, Nurkic was out, so they were at a lack of size, and we took full advantage later on in the game, especially after that first quarter.
Exactly. And Zach and I on the Syracuse segment, we talked about how Duke just kept getting to the rim, and Syracuse had no answer for that. So that's going to come up next. But very similar to what happened in the Warriors game, where the Blazers just could not stop our firepower on offense. They were just overmatched. The Warriors were just too good for them. And overall, I mean, that was an unbelievable game. I think that's like, I didn't watch a lot of the game. I watched some of it a little bit, but then I see the final stat sheet. It's because usually ESPN sends you a notification that shows you the leading scorer. It's like Steph Curry, 18 points. Final Warriors 132 to something. 132 and Steph had 18. Are you kidding me?
Those were the types of games when we
that's unheard of.
Where it'd be like, oh, Clay had 24, Durant had 31, and Steph had 28. No, nobody on our team had 20 points, which is ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. I've never seen stuff like that. So, yeah. All right, but that was a good game. Dallas sucked, and unfortunately, after Dallas, we have a very rough road trip coming up. Starting with Minnesota, which is tonight. This episode, I'm trying to get it out before the tip-off. Might not happen. But you guys, I bet a lot of you guys will be listening to this after the Minnesota game. After that, Dallas is going to try to get some revenge on them. Then at the Lakers and at Denver. So 4 teams currently in the playoffs besides the Lakers who are in the play-in right now. What are your thoughts on this, Joel? How do you think the Warriors are going to fare on this road trip?
It's a tough road trip because you play 2 games where playing in Denver, I've mentioned this before, and it's one of the most underrated aspects of playing against the Nuggets. Playing in Denver and Utah, but most specifically Denver, places with higher altitude, sucks because the guys, obviously it's just the guys that aren't playing in Denver on a home games night to night basis, they get kind of fatigued by it. And you got to play against Jokic, who we have no one for. Granted, no one really does, but Jokic always plays well against us. And we have to play Towns tonight. So it's 2 guys, 2 bigs that, could just lay the hammer on us. Dallas, we have struggled against Dallas in the past. I mean, not even including this just colossal collapse from a couple nights ago. You just check the numbers. Last year, I remember we've lost some heartbreaker games to Dallas. We've always struggled, I feel like, a bit against Dallas. The Laker game is the one where I feel like you get a bit of a break, and it's a team with LeBron James.
The Warriors should beat the Lakers, and I also want to correct myself real quick. I said Minnesota was a playoff team. They're currently in the play-in, but they're 3 games behind Denver. So you're playing the 5, 6, 7, and 9 seed in the West.
Yeah. So I mean, And look, the West is so tight where these teams, I mean, we're coming down, like, we're getting near the closing stretch of the seasons. Most teams probably have roughly 20 games left. Minnesota and Denver and Dallas, the Lakers, I think the Lakers are a broken team, and I just think you have to go in there and take advantage of it. But those three, I mean, they've got young guys. Mavericks obviously have Doncic, and they've got new legs in there. Denver, they're not necessarily young, but they could be getting guys back soon, so they may be motivated to, go on a big closing stretch. In Minnesota, Edwards and
I
Towns,
believe also the Denver is back to back with the Clippers. We'll record next time about the Clippers. We're gonna be at home against the Clippers, but they're also they're also playing right now. They would play Minnesota
So we're gonna have a lot to talk about next time because 4 games will have subsided between the end of this and the start of next episode.
Exactly. Definitely a lot to talk about coming in the future, and a lot to talk about for Syracuse as well. Also on a very rough stretch. As I mentioned, going to talk about the Duke game, the domination of Duke. Lots to talk about Syracuse, lots to break down. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to episode 6 of the Corcoran Cap, segment number 2 here, talking about Syracuse basketball. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran, and to my right, Zach Kopelman. Zach, very interesting week to say the least for Syracuse. How you feeling?
Some losses in there, so I mean, we'll get to that, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season. I mean, obviously one regular season game left, but we'll see.
Definitely. And for those of you who are not following Syracuse, they played 4 games since the last time we recorded, which was last Sunday. So they played Georgia Tech Monday, overtime win 1-1. Notre Dame, they lost by 10 at Notre Dame. Duke, blowout at home. And then UNC, another overtime game, but they just cannot keep it going in overtime. And the one thing I've just taken away from this is that Syracuse has been so inconsistent. And I think this has been the common theme all season. And I think you really want to highlight the inconsistency for Syracuse. It's in these 4 games. You look at, I'll have to pull up the box scores in a sec, but just to start with the bat, looking at the Duke and UNC game, the last 2 games, Cole Swider had 2 points against Duke, 36 against UNC. That's the second most ever scored in the Dean Dome by a road opponent, which is crazy. I mean, just an flat out unbelievable performance. I mean, we would not have been where we were without Cole Swider in that game. Probably would have been a lot worse because the rest of the team was very not so good. I mean, Duke, you had Buddy Boeheim, Joe Girard having pretty solid games, kind of carrying that team. Versus UNC, nothing from them. Girard had 4 turnovers. I know he had that shot to send it to overtime, but that's besides the point because Joe Girard throughout the game was really not that great. I mean, Buddy was okay, but I mean, I've been figuring out he's been a bit more consistent lately. I looked at his stats; he's definitely scoring double figures almost every game. But I mean, you sometimes get the 20+ point performances from him, and then sometimes you just get 10-point duds, which for Buddy standards, 10 points is really not that great.
Yeah, UNC is a pretty dynamic team. If I could focus on them for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you have a guy like Leaky Black, who, not really the volume scorer for UNC, but he's probably their best defender. When he was on Swider, he wasn't scoring. When he was on Buddy, he wasn't scoring. He was on Buddy for a lot of the game. So, that could lead to some of the perceived inconsistency. But yeah, I agree. I mean, from game to game, Swider 11 against Notre Dame in a loss. He played 13 minutes against Duke. You really couldn't play him out there because you had to play big with Mark Williams, Paolo Banchero. But Jimmy wasn't really giving you much either, so you couldn't play him. And then Monday against UNC, I mean, obviously Swider has a great game, but it doesn't matter when the rest of the team isn't playing as well as they should.
Exactly. And I think the thing with also Jimmy Boeheim, let's talk about 0 points against Duke. Are you kidding me? 27 the game against Notre Dame. That's another inconsistent thing. And you want to talk about the bigs being inconsistent. I think the thing with the bigs is they just haven't been there, period. I think that you have inconsistency all around, and then you have the bigs. And I think the Duke game, it was more – I don't think it was – I mean, I think we did everything we can in the Duke game. We could have done more, yes, but Duke was just overpowering us. And their bigs – I mean, Mark Williams – 28 points, 12 boards, I believe it was for him. Banchero had 21 It was, I mean, yeah, the bigs just dominated. AJ Griffin, I know he's not really a big, but still a forward, 20 points. So their biggest guys on the team, their biggest starters really scored. Wendell Moore and Trevor Keels, they held pretty well. They held to their own. But other than that, it was really just the bigs dominated against Duke. And Syracuse's bigs, I mean, Frank Anselm, I mean, we obviously go to the Syracuse games together, Zach, I, and a few other people. And you saw the first play. Duke scores a point, might have been a 3 or something. Jim Boeheim, just goes right to the bench and gets Barama to get up. I mean, that kind of just describes how he's been playing. And he has not been playing well. I think you had that quote Wednesday against Notre Dame. Never have I ever told a player to jump in my 100 years of coaching. I think that really just says it all. And I believe yesterday, Anselm still got the start. He just 2 points, really. Sidibe had 25 minutes. He had 18. Sidibe also played way more against Duke. Notre Dame, looking at the stats, Anselm did play a bit more. Anselm had a better game against Notre Dame, 8 boards, but still no points, got to score more. Inconsistency as well. Joe Girard, 2 points. I mean, I feel like we only win games when at least 4 of our 5 starters are scoring in double figures.
Yeah, here's the thing about the bigs is you really don't have a dynamic player out there. I mean, Jimmy is certainly not what I would consider a dynamic player. I don't even think I consider him a big. He just happens to be slow. He's shorter than Swider, and Swider plays small forward. You don't really have that kind of player out there who, is a game changer. And I think Noesse Edwards, in a way, kind of was that for Syracuse, but I don't think he would have changed the outcome of the Duke game. I don't really think he would have propelled us over UNC, even though that was a close game. The inconsistency from the bigs, especially, is kind of concerning, considering that your youngest guy there, not really counting Bennie Williams, who we could talk about in a minute, is Frank Anselm, and he seems to be on the shortest leash of the whole team. Jim will put him in the start, but as soon as he messes up, Sidibe's in, and Sidibe is 24 years old. He's not going to be playing college basketball next year. You don't have a guy who is going to be like your guy next year at a power forward or center position. Bennie Williams, notwithstanding, he had a very good game against Duke. I think is really the only positive, but every other game he really hasn't shown you much. I mean, he could be a fine player, but what does he bring to this team?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just it's kind of crazy how it's like you have a ton of guys who are just kind of there, don't really do much. I mean, I think the thing with Noesse Edwards, when you had him, and I know we've talked about him like every episode ever since he got hurt, but I think the thing with him is like he really just dominated the bigs. Like he was. I think Syracuse would have won. They beat Georgia Tech. I think they 100% would have beat Notre Dame. 100% would have beat UNC if they had a guy like Noesse Edwards there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was just such a factor at the beginning of the season, and even though we weren't a great team then, we certainly are not a good team now. Without him, just because he makes such a difference, not only defending other bigs, he doesn't make all the mistakes that Frank does, and he provides something on offense. The players, the four other starters trust to get him the ball, and trust that he can score in the paint, and he rebounds offensively. He rebounds defensively too, which Anselm especially struggles with. But you see, we don't have a player like that on the team. And obviously Jesse's coming back next year. But like with the other centers in the ACC, you saw Mark Williams and Paolo Banchero play on Saturday. We don't have a player as dynamic as Mark Williams, Paolo Banchero, AJ Griffin, or even some of the guys on UNC. We don't have a Caleb Love. I know he's not a big, but we don't have a dynamic player who, like, obviously draws a lot of attention. Obviously, Buddy, great player, draws a lot of attention, but we don't have a player that just completely changes the aura of the game. I think people think that's what Buddy is. He happens to be a very good scorer, but he doesn't. I don't think he changes.
There's a reason why. There's a reason why Buddy Boeheim isn't in the discussion anymore for best player in college basketball. He doesn't. He's just. I mean, he's a good player, but I mean, I think ideally you're looking at. I think ideally Buddy Boeheim is a guy who's not going to be the number one option on a team. He's going to be. I'll just take the.
Buddy Boeheim should ideally play almost an AJ Griffin role for Duke, where he's a catch and shoot player, and obviously he's a little more dynamic than that. I kind of went overboard saying that like we don't have a dynamic player like Buddy Boeheim, but I think even a guy like Caleb Love offers more to your team than a guy like Buddy Boeheim. He can spot up from anywhere. I'm not saying Buddy can't, but he's not going to be here next year, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think you've seen flashes of Bennie Williams, especially against Duke. I want to talk about that because Bennie Williams had a very good game against Duke. He had 14.6 boards. And you saw the flashes of the dynamic player Bennie Williams is why Syracuse recruited him. But overall, I definitely think, I cannot figure out Bennie Williams. I don't know if it's something with the coaching. I don't know if it's something with his play because you see him come in 14 against Duke, 30 minutes. And then you see him 3 minutes against Georgia Tech, no points. 2 minutes against Notre Dame, no points. 7 minutes against UNC, no points. The majority of those minutes in overtime once Cole Swider fouled out. So, I mean, Zach, what are your thoughts on Bennie Williams this week? I really cannot figure this guy out because I think especially against Duke, he just flashed and that just got everyone so excited. And then he just like did not do anything the other games.
See, what did Bennie Williams do against Duke that he can't do every other game against better players is my question. Because he honestly looked like our best player at times out there on the court, which is
he did.
Weird. He was our leading rebounder, which for a guy who is built the way he is against guys like Mark Williams and Paolo Banchero, who I will not shut up about, that's ridiculous that you have a starting center and a 24-year-old backup who can't out rebound our 4-star freshman who probably weighs less than me. He looked like a dynamic player out there, and like that's what you're looking for. He played high motor basketball. He was running around, he was boxing out, he was jumping for rebounds, making plays on the defensive end, and obviously he looked confident when he was shooting the ball, even if he wasn't making it. He had a nice scoop layup, very athletic looking, which I don't know if anyone else on this team would have made or taken that shot. Maybe Buddy would have taken that shot. Maybe Cole. They wouldn't have made it. That's
a ridiculous.
When you get
I think a guy like Noesse Edwards could possibly make that. But obviously he's not playing.
When you get an athlete like Bennie Williams on your team, like that's the stuff you expect out of a guy like Bennie Williams. That's what we need to see more of, and I expect it next year, especially if he's going to be a full-time starter and he's going to get real rotation minutes, because 7 minutes is not doing him any justice. 30 minutes against Duke, and he shows that. 31 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't really remember, but like that's the stuff we need to see against the best team in the ACC, and he needs to continue that.
Exactly. And I think the thing that it's so unfortunate that he had such a good game against Duke and is just nowhere else not getting the minutes, because, you know, he flashes the potential against Duke, not getting minutes elsewhere in other games. You know what that screams? Transfer. So he might not even be back next year. That's the big concern.
I mean, he said he's coming back. I'm gonna take his word for that. You never know nowadays, but
I get that. I'm gonna
be pretty upset.
No, I would be upset too. I mean, he is going to have a starting position next year. I think that's locked in. Jimmy Boeheim is gone. I think the majority of the recruiting class is guards, or maybe you have a wing in there. I don't know. I think you're going to get.
We got a wing and we got a couple wings, but they're on the shorter side. Benny's going to play most likely power forward, maybe slot into the Cole Swider position. We'll see. Obviously Edwards is going to start. We got a pretty tall 7-footer. I don't know if
you have
the bench, but Anselm's still going to be there. I mean, we got a good class coming in. I'm not saying that none of them should start, but I think Benny, Joe, and Jesse are locks or near locks to be starters next year.
Cole Swider will have to see, and then you probably have there's one shooting guard coming in, Justin Taylor, the 6'6" shooting guard. 5 good recruits, in my opinion. Looking at, I mean, we'll talk about the recruiting class later, but just to put it out there really quickly, Kadir Copeland, point guard, Justin Taylor, shooting guard. Chris Bunch, 6'8" forward. Malik Brown, 6'9" power forward. He's the other guy that could challenge Bennie Williams for that starting spot. And then at center, Peter Carey, who will probably take the role that Anselm has, because I just do not see Anselm having a role on this team going forward. If I'm being
Anselm,
honest.
I think the center comes in. Anselm moves down the depth chart into the depths of Barama, Sidibe, Hell,
John Bolajak area.
Yeah, John Bolajak.
Exactly.
Until he shows that he actually knows how to be a college basketball player. What was it, Malik Brown? The power forward?
Malik Brown is a power forward. He's the guy that
Malik
could challenge
Brown,
Bennie Williams.
I think you can realistically start them together. You've seen Benny play the 3 and the 4. I think he can really. I mean, he's versatile enough defensively that you can play him anywhere. You play Brown at the power forward, and I think he's probably your best recruit coming in. You probably start one of the other guys, and then Copeland takes the bench role next to Samir. I think you have a pretty good 9-10 man rotation next year, which is something to be excited about that we can't be excited about this year.
100%. But yeah, I definitely think. I mean, I know Jim Boeheim said we're probably looking at 2 to 3 starters from this recruiting class. I mean, we only had one freshman last year, Bennie Williams. So it's definitely good to get some guys. Okay, real quick Miami preview. Let's talk about the game. It's our 4th quad 1 game in a row. They haven't had Miami would not be quad 1 because we're at home. But anyways, Miami is a tournament team. And so this is going to be big because we have not won. First of all, we're going to finish the year with the UNC loss. We finished the year 0 quad 1 wins. That just does not scream tournament. But if you want a little bit of momentum going to the ACC, get a little bit of hope, I think this Miami game, you kind of have to win. And looking at the ACC standings right now, we're locked
into the 8-9.
8-9 games.
So, where we land, we are getting one of the 8-9 spots. So,
and it also looks like Florida State. I don't know how many games they have left.
Yeah, I believe us and Florida State are going to play in the first round.
Yes,
which means
exactly.
Winner of that plays Duke. I think Florida State's a little beat up.
We could also play Clemson in the first round if Florida State loses out. No, actually, we could very much play Clemson in the first round as well.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, I'd much rather see Florida State. Honestly, I know we split this season with them. We beat them while they were healthy. They're not healthy anymore. So see Florida State in the first round, and then have to deal with Duke probably. So
yeah, it's going to be Duke next round. So
yeah, that'll be interesting. We have realistically 2 games left this season. So 2-3 games. So yeah, that'll be a good time.
Exactly. Should be a very interesting end of the season. Coming up, segment 3, we're going to be talking about the 49ers, talking about free agency preview part 2. You guys will not want to miss out. Stay tuned. All right, I lied. We're talking about the A's first. Niners will be segment 4. So, yeah. Welcome back. Segment 3 of the Corcoran Cap, talking about the Oakland Athletics moving from basketball to baseball. I am your host, Sam Corcoran. And Jake, baseball might be back, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm pretty excited. I was disappointed this morning. We were just talking about it. I was hoping to roll over, check my phone, and it was going to be, new season. But not quite yet. But it's still exciting.
Exactly. So if you guys are not aware, baseball, obviously in a lockout, trying to get a new deal. We are currently recording this Tuesday it is 11:27 a.m. on the East Coast right now. They started negotiations for today at 11, I believe, so less than half an hour ago. They're hoping to get a deal done by 5 Eastern. So this episode will be – we're recording before we know if there's going to be a baseball season or not. And what we're going to do, we're going to talk about what if there is a deal and if there's not a deal. I know this is an A's podcast. We're going to talk about both from the A's perspective and the MLB perspective, kind of just talk about it both. And I think let's just start off. And also, we're going to also talk about the grievance let's start with the grievance, actually, because 2 hours ago, John Heyman reported that MLB, so I guess the Players Union has a grievance that was filed in 2018 against the Rays, Marlins, A's, and Pirates for failing to spend revenue sharing monies as part of a deal. If that happens, it may somewhat appease for small market owners concerned about the consumer luxury tax threshold rise. So that's kind of something that the players union will help the owners with, owners trying to approve the deal. And I think you can just start off right off the bat, Jake, that I think the A's owner, John Fisher, I mean, you obviously know how cheap he is, how he just does not like to spend money, period. I think he's probably a key reason why these talks have dragged on for so long. And I think there was some tweet, it was like 8 teams that they highlighted like 8 teams that are probably like the reasons why. And there was other tweets highlighting some other teams. And I think you can just say right off the bat that the Oakland A's, they're probably one of the main reasons why these talks carried on for so long and why we're at this point at the 11th hour trying to get through this.
100%. I mean, he's a businessman, not a philanthropist who's looking to see the A's win or looking to see Oakland flourish. He's trying to make an extra buck, and so he's going to be the one in there negotiating and making sure that they're not giving any ground on any issue for no reason. The grievance, I'm a little confused with like what the grievance means, because if it was filed in like 2018, and it was obviously, if it was filed in 2018, it was referring to before 2018 when the A's were obviously pretty bad and in their almost tanking and selling out mode.
I think it was just like the A's in 2018 wanted to tank. They ended up making the playoffs, but I guess I think if you remember 2015 through 2017 were abysmal years for the A's. Those were kind of like the dark ages of the 2010 era, which honestly does not get talked about as one of the best eras in A's baseball, in my opinion. But anyways, back to what we were saying. Just like 2018 was supposed to be a rebuild year, we're not turning around yet. So the A's didn't want to take on much payroll. They still wanted to rebuild. And I think the MLB players just realized that this team is trying to tank. They're not willing to pay the players that are on their team. So on behalf of the A's players, they filed a grievance against the A's.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the lack of effect that it's had. Like, that's where I'm coming up a little. Like obviously the MLB wanted to get thrown out, and that's what their like thing is now, why it's coming up with the CBA. But like what effect did it have? And I honestly can't figure it out.
I mean, I think it's just okay. So Heyman said in this tweet that they're doing this to somewhat appease the owners of these small market teams. And as I said earlier, like the small market teams are probably the reason why this deal hasn't gone through. Like I think just right off the bat, you're going to see teams like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Dodgers, the Giants. Although I bet those 5 teams are like, let's get this done. We need a deal now. We want to play baseball, because that's like they're going to make so much money from that, because they're the 5 biggest markets in baseball. Chicago as well. But then you got the small market teams like Pittsburgh, Oakland, Miami, Tampa, Colorado. Those 5, I think there's obviously a few more, but it's like you get the point. It's just like those guys are not going to be able to they're not going to want to pay, which is ridiculous, because if you own any sports team in general, you're a multimillionaire, if not billionaire, and it's just ridiculous how people just don't want to pay. I mean, I'm not a businessman myself. I am a journalist trying to get into journalism. Jake was more of the business major. So I don't know if you know anything about that, not to put you on the spot or anything, but I mean, I just don't know.
No, I mean, it's more, I feel like it's more a mentality of those teams, and knowing that even if like they're never going to get to the size of the Yankees and the Red Sox and all those teams, the Dodgers that you mentioned, simply because of their location and their fan base size. But I mean, it's disappointing to hear about owners like the owner that the A's had in the 70s and 80s, and for the life of me, I could not come up with his name, but the philanthropist who just wanted to see the A's win, and then he ended up selling the team to the Fishers, and it's disappointing. Like, it would be so fun for Oakland and for the Bay now with not any other team, no Raiders, no Warriors, like to actually have the A's be a real like competitive team. And we just haven't been, even when we're making the playoffs. It's been a little disappointing, but I don't know. Hopefully we can turn it around. And I mean, I was really hoping for the new CBA to put some rules into effect, like maybe a salary minimum of something in the 100+ million would have been nice, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen.
I don't think that would ever get approved. I highly doubt half the teams would be willing to do that because I think baseball, I think honestly, like out of all the owners in professional sports, baseball has the worst.
Well, I mean, the fact that there's no salary cap makes it tough, and especially the owners want the salary cap, and the players. I mean, obviously the players don't.
Yeah, I mean, you can make more money without the salary cap, so I don't know.
It's almost like the salary cap is a competitive balance where everyone's expected to spend right at that. Like in the NBA and NFL, everyone spends right at the salary cap, like every single year, and it's tough to not do that for the A's.
Exactly, 100%. But let's talk about the new CBA. Moving on from the grievance, so we're hoping it gets approved. This episode will come out after. You guys will be listening to this or watching this after the CBA is released. So let's talk about both scenarios. And let's talk about both scenarios. If the CBA happens, Jake, what's next for the A's? What do you think the first move is that the A's are going to try to do?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the whole spring training situation is, because that will come into effect in terms of the A's handling their roster. But I think the very first move is obviously the line for Olsen has been in the water for a little bit, and it's gonna, like, as soon as the new CBA gets signed and teams are allowed to make transactions, stuff's gonna start flying, stuff's gonna start flowing, because as much as people want to say like, oh, like we're not allowed to discuss players and all that, teams have been talking trade this entire time.
Oh, 100%. All the owners are there.
100% in place right now that are just going to start going through, and we're going to see a lot of movement in the first 24 to 48 hours after the CBA gets officially signed. Whether that's an Olsen deal, I don't know, but it's definitely going to be some probably Bassett and Manaea deals that are going through if the A's do end up committing to throwing their, which seems likely that the A's will commit to throwing their roster away and restarting in a few years.
Yeah, I definitely think you're probably looking at something down there. I bet John Fisher, I don't know if he's there, but I bet owners have been talking with him about our players. And I mean, I think you're going to see some deals here and there. I don't know who the first guy is, but I think you're going to see a ton of transactions, not just with the A's, but other teams as well. Also, the free agency frenzy. I think Jock Peterson said it on Twitter. This is about to be like one of the craziest times for baseball. I mean, you're going to, as soon as this deal goes by, you're just going to see. I mean, I think Bob Nightingale, like, obviously, I don't know if you were on Twitter last night, Jake, but I know Bob Nightingale was just spewing everything about the deal, like what's going on, giving updates every minute. Like, that man just does not sleep. And so don't the other guys who are the baseball reporters and everything. And they're not going to sleep for a while after that, because, I mean, you're going to have so much of a free agency frenzy, a trade frenzy. It's going to be exciting times. And so, I mean, we're recording right before the deal is approved or not approved. So next week could be a very crazy episode that we record, Jake.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what makes the CBA so exciting. Obviously, it's nice to like know that the season's going to start on time, but that's at least a month away. So actually a month to the day, right?
Yeah.
But it would be so exciting to get some baseball moves, be able to actually analyze the A's roster and know what we're doing going forward. Because right now it's still ambiguous. Like, as much as you want to say the losses of Canna and Marte and guys like that are saying that the A's are going downhill, and all the reports that came out, we still don't really know. We haven't traded any of our big assets. We could easily decide that, okay, this is still the team we want to go forward. We just couldn't pay Canna and Marte. So
exactly. And I think you look at this team, there haven't been too many transactions. I know we talked about this last time, or a few episodes ago, I should say, with our free agents and everything, about how I think only like 3 guys have signed other places for the A's. There's still guys that we can re-sign. We don't have many free agents, honestly. That's the thing with the A's. We don't have many guys who are still out there. I think the 3 that left were Canna, Marte, and Yan Gomes.
And
Who?
Gomes and Marte they're not really our free agents. Like,
Yeah,
I never
exactly.
expected them to get re-signed. Canna was a potential, but I didn't.
It seemed like Canna wanted to come back, and I think we talked about that. But I mean, it is what it is, and there's going to be new guys coming in. We got some prospects, hopefully coming up this year. We'll see who they are. I know there aren't many. We haven't done a prospect episode, Jake. That could be another one in the future to talk about.
That. The A's farm system, and this is part of the reason I think they're going to end up trading a lot of their big pieces. The A's farm system is pretty tapped right now. I mean, with only one top 100 player in Soderstrom. So,
yeah, they definitely need to get some guys. And I think you can get those guys, especially right now with Matt Olson. I think Chapman, personally, I think I would wait on Chapman. I think you can get a bit more value out of him later on. I think last year was a down season for him, so teams are going to want to give up less. I think he's a great trade deadline guy to get and get some prospects from him.
We talked about this in the trade one a little bit, how it's very similar to Sonny Gray, where Gray came off that season with a 5.56 ERA in 2016, 2017. And then we just waited, and he had a bounce-back season up until the trade deadline, and that's when we got the deal done with the Yankees. And so, yeah, like you said, we'd see something similar done with Chapman, where his offensive numbers last year were just not up to par. But he is a good hitter, so if he can start hitting 260, 270, maybe get an all-star game under his belt, then you could see him getting traded.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely think that the A's are going to – it's tough to say, are they going to trade one of their big names? They're definitely going to trade some guys on the pitching staff, I think. I think they have – for what this team is, I think their starting pitching is honestly decent for a team of what you're expecting. You're probably looking at 80 wins tops, maybe, in my opinion.
I mean, with how the roster is now, if we were able to re-sign some of those bullpen pieces we talked about, and Petit, Diekman, guys like that, I think we could put together a solid team. Because like you said, like, the starting rotation isn't bad. Bullpen's got some pieces, and the lineup is pretty much the same without – and Canna was injured for a good part of the season. So
that's true.
I don't know. The problem for anyone not understanding with Chapman and Olson is if they were to stay, their arbitration contracts next season would be the highest single season contract that any player for the A's has ever had, guaranteed, without it.
Yeah, 100%.
So they're not going to be in an A's uniform next year. I
highly doubt it.
I would like to see the A's do more of what I talked about this in the past, what the Rays do as a small market team, where they signed Wander Franco to that easily tradable but still massive deal. And so they can get so many more assets. Like if Olson had signed a big deal, like let's say 10 years, $100 million when he was like 24. Yeah, I know it's risky for a small market team to do that, but Olson was he was a big prospect for a while. I remember looking at his numbers.
He was our top prospect for a solid 3-4 years, I want to say.
Well, no one hits 40 homers in single A. Matt Olson hit 40 homers in single A. Like, it was just, it could have been something great. And then we're looking at a much bigger return on him with, instead of 3 years, like 6 years, and his contract is guaranteed to be low. It's kind of an Ozzy Albies situation where teams taking advantage of him a little bit, but
exactly,
there's still benefit at the time to both parties.
100%. Definitely a lot to come up for the A's if we get a deal. If we don't, I guess we're just gonna have to wait a little bit more. Coming up, guys, segment 4, a 20-minute segment on 49ers free agency part 2, talking about the quarterbacks and the offensive line. You won't want to miss it. It will be action-packed. Stay tuned. Welcome back to segment 4 on episode 6 of the Corcoran Cap, talking about the San Francisco 49ers. I'm your host, Sam Corcoran. To my right, Rohit Kannan. Rohit, another 20-minute episode, ready to preview some free agents. How are you feeling about the quarterbacks and the offensive line?
Well, I mean, as I've said for the past couple of segments, it's a new era, and we're about to manufacture this team to get ready for that new era. And I mean, when it comes, when you talk about offense, everybody always talks about the quarterback, but who's responsible for keeping the quarterback upright? The offensive line.
Exactly. These two go hand in hand. So I thought, what better way to pair these two together? Got to protect Trey Lance next year, and got to talk about some of the guys who we can bring in maybe to help him. And guys, again, I want to stress this. We are not talking about the draft. The draft content will come later. This is just for free agency. Free agency starts 2 weeks from now, I believe, something around there. So this is just for free agency, talking about guys that we have on our team that are free agents and talking about other guys out there that we can sign. So let's start with the offensive line, because I think we can have more discussion for quarterback towards the end. For offensive line, I mean, the thing is, the 49ers offensive line is pretty set right now. In my opinion, the starting offensive line next year will be Trent Williams at left tackle. Left guard, we're going to talk about in a sec. I think we have a debate going on for that right now between everyone on Twitter. Center, Alex Mack. Right guard, I'm going to stick with Daniel Brunskill. So there's a spoiler. We are going to re-sign Daniel Brunskill, in my opinion, and we should re-sign Daniel Brunskill, in my opinion. And Mike McGlinchey, who I've seen some people say that we need a new right tackle. Maybe his quad is worse than we thought it was. I don't really know. I did talk about a few right tackles that we could highlight, but I think for the meantime, I'm still going to stick with Mike McGlinchey for a starting right tackle.
I mean, I agree with that, and I think I know where you're going with left guard. And there has been a huge debate on left guard, but I mean,
let's just jump into that right now. Let's jump into that right now. Laken Tomlinson or Aaron Banks. Rohit, I want to take a sip of water real quick, so I'll let you start that off.
Thanks. I mean, obviously I'd love to bring Laken Tomlinson back at the right price, but given the fact that he's got his first Pro Bowl nod and he's consistently been one of the best left guards in football from 2017 to today. He's been consistently one of the best left guards in football. And he's honestly not gotten his recognition for it, which honestly is both somewhat surprising and somewhat disappointing. But given that he got a Pro Bowl nod in 2021, given how recent that nod is, I think it's going to drive up his price a bit. I think we might get priced out, but I'd love to bring him back. And if not, Aaron Banks was a pick geared towards a Trey Lance offense rather than Jimmy Garoppolo offense. So with Trey Lance taking over, I think we're going to see a lot more playing time and development out of Aaron Banks that we haven't already seen.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. I think that Laken Tomlinson, as much as I would like to have him back, and I think he is one of the best guards in football, I think people are forgetting that he's going to be paid an 8-figure salary this year. And that's something that the 49ers cannot afford. And you're looking at the high 8-figure salary, not high, but for football standards high. You're looking towards the late teens, early, maybe he cracks 20 million this year. I don't really know. I mean, he could be all over the place. He's definitely probably the most prized guard out there from when you look either him or Brandon Sheriff of the Washington Commanders. So overall, I think Laken Tomlinson is not the best idea to sign back. You have a ton of key free agents coming up. Got to get an extension for Bosa and Deebo Samuel and Dre Greenlaw for that matter. If you really want to bring him back, I don't really know what his situation is with the team and his status with the team is, but I'm taking Aaron Banks all day over Laken Tomlinson. This guy, I know he had a down year. Yes, I think you have to give it a chance. And there's a ton of depth at left guard that you can sign as well. And I'm going to talk about those guys in a sec because there's a ton of guys who you can play at left guard or right guard. Maybe move them back and forth. I mean, Brunskill did it. I bet Tomlinson could probably do it. I know it's a bit different, but overall, I think you could do it. Aaron Banks even did it. And I think one of the reasons why Aaron Banks struggled is because the only place he could go was right guard. He played left guard all throughout college. Laken Tomlinson's a left guard. Now it's time for him to go. And by the way, most scouts, guess who Aaron Banks' comparison was? I can't bring this up enough. Laken Tomlinson. Exactly. Yep. So
I was like, wait for it. Wait for it.
Yeah, Laken Tomlinson, I think, will get a lot of money elsewhere, and I think it's a better fit for him. Because personally, I don't think it's worth it. You just use a second-round pick, and you're going to bench him for a second straight year, and it's not a quarterback. That's a red flag to me.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, people also need to realize that with offensive lines, it's the footwork and the technique is all completely different when you're switching sides of the offensive line. Banks was trained as a left guard. He played left guard throughout college. And then he comes to the NFL and you're like, hey, by the way, we're gonna make you play a right guard. You have to completely switch your footwork around and switch your techniques. It's all backwards.
Which is why I think a lot of people, I remember one big criticism of him was just his footwork was awful. And maybe playing him at left guard is going to be the better idea, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I'm a combat sports fan, so like for me it's easier for me to understand for me to like analyze it, like give an analogy towards like a combat sports perspective. Like, here's the thing. I'm left-handed, I'm a southpaw boxer, so like if you ask me to like go and fight orthodox, fight like a right-handed person, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm so used to like doing things the way a left-handed person would, because the foot stance, the way you move, the way you punch, it's completely different than compared to a right-handed person. And it's the same way when it comes to offensive lines.
Exactly. I think you really
a guy who's played left tackle, right tackle his entire life just randomly switch sides for no reason. And you can't do the same with guards either. It's not just like a plug and play. There's a reason they've trained at the position they have.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think you really have to take that into account. I think it's time to give Aaron Banks a chance. He had 1 year to sit. I think they drafted him for a Trey Lance offense, get that pass protection in, and I think this is going to work out really well with him at left guard. The other two free agents I didn't mention, Tom Compton, Jake Brendel, I really don't have a preference about them.
Honestly, Compton just flat out be gone. I mean, sure,
Compton towards the end of his career, I would not bring him back. Jake Brendel, backup center, and let's get into two guys at backup center who I think would be better options than Jake Brendel. And let's start with these are one of these guys you've definitely heard of. One of these guys I never heard of until I saw a few articles about him. Let's talk about the guy with you have heard of, Dakota Shepley of the Seattle Seahawks. Had a fantastic training camp last year for the 49ers. Would not be surprised if they bring him back to be a backup center behind Alex Mack. The other guy is a guy who worked with Lynn in Detroit. I keep bringing up Anthony Lynn for these offensive positions. Worked with Anthony Lynn in Detroit. Frank Ragnow went out for the year. He filled him at center. Evan Brown is his name. Did pretty well under Anthony Lynn. I think he could get a legit chance with the 49ers to be a backup center. I think that would be a fantastic signing. I would rather have Brown than Shepley, to be completely honest with you.
I mean, familiarity matters. And I mean, if a player's already worked with a member of our coaching staff for an extended period of time, him following said member of the coaching staff to a new team kind of just makes perfect sense. And I think this goes with like just the 49ers and Anthony Lynn as a whole, but having Anthony Lynn as part of the 49ers coaching staff, that's going to bring in a lot of free agents who have played under Lynn in the past, because they're like, hey, this is a system we can easily adapt to. We don't have to learn as much. It's going to be easier on us. We already know what we got to do. It's going to be a slightly less stressful transition.
Exactly. And he filled in Frank Ragnow's shoes pretty well. Frank Ragnow is one of, if not the best center in the league. Those are hard shoes to fill. So I think Evan Brown could do phenomenal in our system, especially under a guy like Anthony Lynn. And I think you're going to see a trend of free agents coming in that played under Lynn, either in LA, Detroit. If there's any Buffalo guys still there from his time there, you might see that. I don't really know. They really took a complete turnaround after 2016, after the Rex Ryan era ended. So I don't really know about that. But let's talk about guard. That's the position we've been talking about a lot with Laken Tomlinson and Daniel Brunskill. I'm going to bring up a few names for you. And I think the thing is you might have to move some of these guys around. But if you don't bring back a guy like Daniel Brunskill, how about you bring in a California native, from what I believe, Northern California guy, Alex Kappa from Humboldt State University, currently on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He might not even be from Northern California. I could just be making that up. I know he went to a NorCal school, but he could be a guy who can play right guard. And if Daniel Brunskill leaves, would it be expensive? Yes, he actually could be more expensive than Laken Tomlinson, but I'm willing to take a chance on him instead of Laken Tomlinson because we don't have any right guard depth, whereas we have left guard depth.
That makes sense.
Exactly. And I think other guys you can look at, Quentin Spain of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a left guard. I mean, he could be depth. He's not really the best guy. Could get a starting gig somewhere. I'm going to be completely honest. Like, offensive line, like, you see a ton of guys on that list, and half the guys you've just never heard of because they're backup guys. Evan Brown, I would not have heard of if it weren't for a few articles saying, hey, the Niners should bring this guy in. He worked under Lynn. And then the other guy I'll just bring up who could play right guard, James Daniels, believe he is on the Bears. I think he's a guard on the Bears. I think he plays center as well, which is another good thing. So if you can get a center, if you can get a center guard hybrid is always something very good to have, in my opinion. It's why I wanted someone in the draft last year, and we did not get him, and I'm forgetting who
Creed
it
Humphrey?
is. Not Creed Humphrey, but that was somebody who it might have been. Actually, it might have been Creed Humphrey. I think it was Creed Humphrey. Now that I think of it, because he can play guard and center, and I think that's what a lot of people were confused by. Why'd you take Banks instead of Creed Humphrey? But that makes a bit more sense. So yeah, those are the few guards I have. As for tackle, I didn't really go too in depth. We're set at left tackle. And also another reason why I didn't go in depth, you have Jalen Moore, you have what's his face? Colton McKivitz. I mean, I'm not a big McKivitz fan, but he did improve a little bit last year. And you also can get a guy in the draft. I know the draft is stacked with offensive linemen across the board, so I definitely think you can get a developmental guy. But if you want to get two guys in free agency, how about Jermaine Ifedi of the Chicago Bears? In my opinion, he is at the stage of his career where he's probably a mid-tier starter, good backup. I'd be willing to sign him, especially if McGlinchey's issues are nagging along. And Sam Tevi of the Indianapolis Colts, that's just a right tackle starter. I highly doubt we get him, but thought I'd throw him out there in case Mike McGlinchey's squad is not what we think it is.
I mean, I think the majority of the discussion around McGlinchey in general is just injury concerns, which is something that plagued the 49ers throughout the entire team, really. Because he got arthroscopic surgery on his left knee back in 2019 that caused him to miss about a month and a half. And then he tore his quad this season, week 9 against the Cardinals, I want to say. I might be wrong about the game, but I know it was a torn right quad. And so that's already two kind of major things. I mean, here's the thing. Arthroscopic surgery there's pretty routine. You're mostly just like cutting it open, just cleaning stuff up, maybe some like cartilage debris or something like that. In theory, that's not something you want to worry about, but when you couple it in with like what offensive linemen do, it's like, ooh, that might be something you may want to work on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you guys you're definitely looking for someone like that. I think good depth is a good idea. Jalen Moore seems like, I think they kind of want to move him to guard. I think McKivitz could be out the door after the season. You cut him in training camp. I think they're 100% going to draft a tackle. Maybe free agency, there's some guy I don't really recognize that they're going to bring in, which could work out. I mean, I'm not too familiar with all the guys in free agency, if I'm being honest. I think draft could be the way to go if you want to develop someone behind Mike McGlinchey. Maybe you're looking at one of your comp round. You have a comp round 3 for Mike McDaniel. Could use that. Maybe go into round 4. Could use someone around that area.
I mean, and also you might want to look into maybe like a tackle guard combo instead of a guard center combo. Just
100%.
If nothing else, it cushions the right tackle position.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that could be a great guy to get, especially if you're looking for a backup. If you're a versatile guy on offensive line, you're going to get a contract somewhere if you're a backup. So I think it works out really well. Before we move on to quarterback, you got any trade targets in mind, Rohit? I personally don't.
Ooh, yeah, I honestly don't. Because I don't think we can see a lot of offensive line movement this year. Houston might be moving on from Laramie Tunsil, but I don't see any feasible way of where we could bring in Tunsil, especially.
You can't bring in another massive contract. I think the only way you bring in Tunsil is if Trent Williams is somehow involved in that deal. And let's be real, Trent Williams is better than Laramie Tunsil.
Vastly better. Like
he is aging. He is aging.
Around. And I know there's no way the Niners are going to do it, but it's at least worth saying because for what it's worth, there are rumors out there saying he might be moving.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens, but I highly doubt we're going to make a trade for someone this offseason. All right, moving on to quarterback. This is obviously a very big position. The 49ers do not have a backup quarterback right now on their roster. I mean, you could go Nate Sudfeld. Rich Gangarillo is now off this team. I highly doubt he comes back. Did not really do much. Jimmy Garoppolo probably going to get traded. Guys, we made a whole episode on Jimmy Garoppolo trade scenarios, so go watch that if you want to talk more about Jimmy Garoppolo. We talked about that on a previous episode. Not going to do that here. We're talking about guys in free agency for the meantime. I have 5 quarter. Do you want to start with quarterbacks, Rohit? I'll let you give. I'll give you a shot to set. Give me a few names out there.
I mean, honestly, I think the most obvious names out there who would be really good backups for Trey Lance would be Marcus Mariota from the Las Vegas Raiders and Tyrod Taylor, who was in Houston. Those are probably the 2 most obvious names and probably the most 2 talked about names. But there have been some rumors saying that like some teams may be looking towards getting like a veteran bridge quarterback for this season instead of going completely all in with a rookie.
Mitchell Trubisky's been a big name for that.
I know Pittsburgh is one of those teams who've been very much rumored to be going after a veteran quarterback rather than like going after a rookie. And here's the thing. Mariota and Taylor are both free agents, meaning you don't have to give anything up to sign them. All you're giving up is a bit of cap space. It's not like you're moving away draft picks and trading for a quarterback like Garoppolo or Wentz. So it's much more feasible. So that's
exactly
something to look out for.
100%, and that kind of concerned me with all the Garoppolo stuff that these guys could be getting signed elsewhere. But you know what? I think some of these guys are going to get signed to teams that have a backup situation where they have a starter in front. So I don't really I think Garoppolo will still get traded. It might be for a bit less than what we were hoping for. But I know Mitch Trubisky, a lot of teams, Matt Miller said that he talked to a ton of guys about Mitch Trubisky today at the draft combine. That doesn't make much sense to me. They should be talking about guys like Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett. But guess what? Those guys aren't really good. This is they're good quarterbacks, but this is a very weak quarterback class. And you're really not like the ceilings of these guys are either very high, but the floors are extremely low. That's what I'm looking for, like a Malik Willis right there. Or you have like high floor, low ceiling, I should say. So, I mean, you're really not looking at too much, in my opinion, in this draft class, which is why I think this quarterback market could be rough. But I'm going to highlight Tyrod Taylor and Marcus Mariota were definitely 2 guys I wrote down. Obviously, Tyrod Taylor was a guy I thought we could have got last year as well. Mariota, I think he's a bit too pricey, in my opinion. I want to keep it on some of the low side. So how about 3 guys that kind of replicate Trey Lance's game as well? Let's start with Tyler Huntley of the Baltimore Ravens, Jacoby Brissett of the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to talk about these 2 for a little bit because the last one I've spoke a lot on in the past. But Tyler Huntley, I think exemplifies what Trey Lance does. Did pretty well in Baltimore, if I'm being completely honest. I think he could be a fantastic backup quarterback for the 49ers, and I think he would fit the system very well. Maybe a bit more arm talent would be good, which is why I also wrote down Jacoby Brissett. He has a bit less legs, more arm talent. But how about the guy who I think is the perfect mix of all of that, is currently in the NFC West, so you're going to get some intel from there, Geno Smith. I think this would be a fantastic signing for the 49ers. Bring him in. You have that mobile quarterback. He honestly did a somewhat decent job with Seattle this year, in my opinion. You bring him in. You get the intel about the Seahawks and Pete Carroll's system. You can get a guy who replicates Trey Lance's game very well. I think he's a fantastic player for the 49ers to sign as a backup quarterback. And in my opinion, he's probably the best option.
And he's undefeated at coin tosses. So if we ever have
exactly undefeated at coin tosses, and I think I'm surprised not many people are talking about this. You know what? If you guys, hey, I'm just gonna say right now, if we sign him, I'm the one talking about Geno Smith. I think he would be a fantastic signing for the 49ers.
Plus, he has some starting experience. I mean, he's been with the
Jets.
He filled in quite well for Russell Wilson for a good chunk of this season. Sure, it didn't translate to wins, but you see Geno Smith playing, it's like, holy crap, there's actually something there. So This guy actually has some sort of starting experience and has a decent bit of it too, because remember, he was a longtime starter for the New York Jets. For what it's worth.
Yeah, I definitely think, all these guys have starting experience, all these quarterbacks. So, you're going to get a guy in, you're obviously looking for a game manager and a backup quarterback, some guy who has some experience. So that's why I think it's going to work out pretty well with any of these guys. But I think Geno Smith, in my opinion, I think the most experience I would probably, it's probably Mariota, but he's a bit too expensive. I think Tyrod Taylor is probably the most experienced out of all of these guys. But I think Geno Smith is going to work just fine. He's worked well with Wilson. I think him or Tyrod Taylor would be the best option. Huntley, too, would be a decent option, but I would rather have Taylor or Geno Smith. My only fear for Tyrod Taylor is that he's going to get overpaid by some team that's looking for a veteran guy. So we'll have to see. Any trade targets for you, Rohit? Anything else you wanted to say about any of the guys we talked about?
Honestly, I don't see any reason why a team would trade for a backup quarterback. Worst comes to worst, you're going to pick up some sort of 7th-round rookie and just sit and just stay there as a backup quarterback. Like, that's probably the worst. That's probably the best thing you'd probably do if you can't really get a veteran to sit behind Lance. Don't go trade for a backup quarterback. That's just absurd.
100%. And I think I'd much rather get a free agent, considering Lance might need some development. But you know what? If the worst comes to worst, I guess we'll have to do that. 100%. Well, that's going to do it for episode 6 of the Corcoran Cap. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Make sure to follow me on Twitter right down here at @the_Sam Corcoran. Follow everyone else on Twitter. Rohit is at RohitKanan71, at ZCope3 for Zach, at Joel Pettit10 for Joel. Jake, I mean, it's not even worth mentioning him anymore. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.